Hello everyone, I'm back with another video for you today. Now I'm going to be taking a look at all of the Pool 1 cards in Marvel Snap. So these are the cards that you unlock all the way up until collection level 214. And I've already got a video on the starting cards if you want to take a look at that. What I think are the very best of the best, and which ones you shouldn't play when you're starting out in the game. So lots of cards here to dive through. I'm going to base the rankings here on how well they perform around the level of when you unlock them, so in Pool 1 and 2, particularly, rather than a bit later on in Pool 3 where you're going to have some cards that are actually becoming a lot more better, or there are more synergies with other cards that exist, that kind of thing. But for now, let's just look at how well these cards do in their sort of respective pool, shall we? Okay, so let's jump right in. The first one we've got here is Yondu. Yondu is a card I'm not a huge fan of in the early pools, and even in the later ones. It only really works with death decks in the pool 3 and so on, where you discard an enemy unit. It essentially destroys the enemy unit from the top of their deck, meaning death goes down in mana. But yeah, not really a whole lot of use for this card in the early pools. I'm going to put it in D tier. It's like you can play it, and it might sometimes mess up the opponent's game plan, but it's a bit of a random one to run, and I'm not a huge fan of it personally. I know there are some people that probably like this card and think it's pretty good, but for me, I'm not a huge fan. Okay, next we've got Uatu the Watcher. This card is pretty terrible. I'm gonna be honest. You probably should never really run it. You can run it if you want to sort of have fun and for the memes of it, but as a competitive card in these pools, it's really not a good one to include. It doesn't do enough for you, I'm afraid. So I'm going to put this one in E tier. Not really very playable. I have put it in decks before, and I do even run it myself still sometimes in Pool 3 just for the fun of it, but yeah, not a very good card. Okay, next we have a Korg. Now, Korg is a pretty good one-drop, actually, unlike these other two. Giving the opponent the rock is quite often going to brick up their draw, as opposed to Yondu, who doesn't really do anything other than get rid of a card from their deck entirely. So Korg, a lot better. I'd probably put it in A tier. You could throw this card in a lot of decks, and it wouldn't be too bad. It does, of course, find play even later on in the pools in things like Cerebro decks, but yeah, I think Korg is a pretty good one. I'd run this in a lot of decks, in Zoo in particular, for example. Korg can definitely be good. Okay, next up we have Forge. Forge, you boost the next friendly unit you play by 2. There are some movement synergies with this. You can boost up, for example, a multiple man and then move him around and get extra strength. I don't think the card's very good, guys. It's a little bit too difficult to get that sort of value. Obviously, the movement synergy means I'll probably put it in C tier because it's a card that will fit in that archetype, but it's not very strong. It could honestly be D tier. I think I'm going to put it in D tier. I don't really rate this card. It's not very good. Okay, next we've got Scarlet Witch. You can change the location to a different one. Kind of a neat little tech card, can be useful sometimes. I'd probably put it in C tier. I wouldn't generally run this myself. It used to be 1 mana and a 2-drop, I believe. A 2 strength 1-drop at some point, and back then it was a lot better. But at 2 mana, not really going to be playing this in very many situations. I think I'd put it in C tier. Wouldn't really be playing this in most of my decks, I think. Okay, next we have Enchantress. Enchantress is a pretty good one, so she can shut down ongoing effects at a location with her unrevealability. Definitely can be used to negate things like the Devil Dinosaur, which is one of the better Pool 2 and Pool 1 decks. So, in all honesty, Enchantress probably deserves a pretty good spot, maybe an A tier, just for being such a flexible and decent tech card that you can use to counter what your opponent's doing. Okay, next up we have Professor X. A little bit of a tricky one to place for me because, honestly, this card... Oh, it's missing its border, apparently. That's unfortunate. This card is really quite good later on when you have things like Spider-Man in the Pool 3 or Daredevil, where you can predict the opponent's play on turn 5 or lock them out with locking them out of the board game plan. But without those things, it can see play in an ongoing deck because he has an ongoing effect, so you can buff him with Spectrum. Honestly, other than that, not great. I'd probably put him in C tier. I don't think it's a super good card. It does allow you to do some cheeky things in Pool 1, though, and can be a nice card. Maybe I'll put him... Maybe it does deserve to be B. You can do some sneaky things in Pool 1, and people will not expect Professor X that often. So I'll put him in B. I think it's a playable card, but not super great at this stage of the collection. Okay, next up we have Angela. Angela's pretty damn good. Not many 2-drops are going to get you 6 points of value. I'll tell you that much. In fact, it's very hard to get that much value from a 2-drop this point in the collection. So I think I have to kind of put Angelo in S tier. It's a very, very good card. And it sees play even a bit later on in the pools with Zoo decks and the like. It does kind of require you to play a lot of units, so it might not fit if you're going for a just, I don't know, some kind of pure value point slam deck rather than playing lots of 1s and 2s and things. But I think at this pool level, Angelo kind of deserves to be an S tier card. Okay, next we have Namor. Namor looks good on paper. He gets +5 strength if you only have him in a row, if he's the only guy there in a location. So 10 for Thor is very good. The problem is it sort of baits you, I think, into going in that particular row only with one guy, and the opponent gets then a pretty easy win and trades. They get a win in a row where you already spent 4 mana, which is quite a bad thing for you most games. So honestly, Namor's a pretty bad card, and a lot of new players get baited into using it. Because it seems so good on paper, but yeah, in reality, just not very good, gives your opponent a big advantage. I'm tempted to put him in D tier. I think I kind of will do that. I think it's really not a great card. Okay, next up we have Apocalypse. It's a bit of a tricky one to do, because obviously he gets a lot of value if you play the discard package with him, but it's so reliant on synergy to get his value, and he is a very predictable play, because your opponent can see how much strength he's at, and can see that you want to play him on turn 6. So for that reason, he's probably a C tier card, maybe a D tier card. You could definitely make that argument. But yeah, not one that I usually will play if I want to get wins at this pool level. But it's one you can play, and it's a finisher, and it's a deck that kind of works, and you can consider. So yeah, I think C tier is probably fair for him. Okay, next up, Spider-Woman. Spider-Woman's a pretty good value card. The only issue is it kind of forces you to play it in a row where the opponent's already built up for you to get pretty great value from it. A bit of a tricky one to place. I'll probably put it in A tier. I think it's a good card. You can kind of slot it into a lot of decks. You can play it with Odin even, with on-reveal effects. You can play it just as a value play in a lot of situations at this pool level. Kind of an okay card. It could deserve to go to B perhaps, because you're not always going to want to run it. Maybe B is a bit more deserving. It's like a bit of a cheeky card. I don't know. A little bit of a tricky one to rate. I'll probably put it in B tier. I don't think it's super amazing. Yeah, I think B is fair. All right. Let's not lose sleep over that decision. Okay, next up, Mantis. You might be enticed to play Mantis in a dinosaur deck where you draw lots of cards, but it's not a great card even in a dino deck. Maybe at this pool level when you don't have many other options, it's okay. I'd probably put it in C tier. I think it's better than this Yondu, for example. And you can kind of play it, but it's a bit random and high rolly as to whether you hit it or not. And yeah, a bit of a weird 1-drop there, but I think C tier is pretty fair. Okay, next we have Squirrel Girl. This is a great card for Zoo decks. Obviously, you can fill up all the rows with squirrels, 1 strength units, and just get so much value with things like Khazar and Blue Marvel. So Squirrel Girl, I think, has to go in A tier. It's maybe not like a super uber card that you could play in any deck, but it's certainly a very strong one if you're going to be considering playing a deck that goes wide and plays a lot of units. Okay, next we have Angel. This is an interesting one. It comes out of your hand, out of your deck even? It just comes onto the board when stuff gets destroyed, when your stuff gets destroyed. So a bit of a destroy synergy card. It's okay. I mean, it can kind of protect you from Electra and things at this pool level, and maybe, I don't know, Killmonger and stuff like that. I'd probably put it in C. I wouldn't really run this card very often, but you could consider it if you're trying to do something with Carnage and Nova and stuff. Maybe that can be okay value. Yeah, I think C is fair for Angel. Okay, next we got Morph. Morph is a truly bad card. The bot will play this a lot against you if you're playing into bots. You'll be facing a lot of Morphs, and they'll steal your Infernaut, and they'll steal your whatever big play that you have. But Morph, no, way too random. Not going to be played in most decks. You don't want to be relying on a Morph to win your games. E tier. Meme card, E tier. Okay, next we have Strong Guy. He's a strong guy. You can play him in aggro. In Zoo deck, you can play a lot of 1-cost cards and then discard something with Blade and stuff maybe, and get some nice value. It's okay. It's an okay card. I might even put it in A tier. No, let's put it in B. I don't think it's the best of the best. It works quite well in Zoo, but it's not like uber, omega amazing or necessary in Zoo either. So I'll put it in B tier. It's a decent card. Okay, next we have Swordmaster. This works quite well with Apocalypse and stuff. it's an okay value card, but that discard is going to hurt you if you're not playing discard synergy, so I'll put it in C tier. Fairly straightforward. Next we have Multiple Man. This is a card that can get a lot of value. The only issue is it splits the value into all of the 3 rows, which means if your opponent just avoids one of the rows that, and they only play 2 rows, you might be lacking strength. But it does work very well with movement. It's a good movement card, and it does enable the movement archetype to work, I think, here. So I'll put it in B tier for that reason. It's a card that, in a certain archetype, does perform pretty well. And movement is an archetype at that rank, and you can win games with it. So I think it's fair to put him in B tier. Okay, White Queen. This is an interesting one, because White Queen is very commonly played in later pools to get information on what your opponent has, since she draws the highest cost card from your opponent's hand into your hand. So it can be very good for stealing OP cards from higher collection level players later on in the pools. I'm not sure it's an S tier worthy card. You can sort of play it in every deck, but it's not going to be the most value, and I wouldn't generally play it in every deck. I think it works best in Dino decks, so I'll put it in A tier. It's a good card when it's good, and it does certainly become very good later in the pools. Okay, Moon Girl, we've got a similar situation. She can be good in certain decks, and that deck is very strong when you use her. She duplicates your hand, so you can use her with Devil Dinosaur, which we'll get on to talking about. And you can get some value from it in other cheeky ways. You can perhaps copy certain tech cards that are strong for you. You can, if there's a location that does something to affect your cards that gives them strength or makes your cards cheaper mana-wise or something like that, then Moon Girl can actually be very, very strong. But yeah, generally it's sort of only really played in Dino decks, but when it is played, it's pretty good. So I'll put it in A tier. It's sort of a card that can be played a lot. Talking of, we've got Devil Dinosaur, who obviously synergizes very well with Moon Girl. This is an S tier card. This card is insanely strong. It gets +2 for every card you have in hand, ongoing effect. You can even play it with Spectrum because it has ongoing, theoretically. It's countered by Shang-Chi, Enchantress, but with Moon Girl and with this sort of archetype, it's one of the better Pool 1, Pool 2 decks, even Pool 3 decks, arguably, that you can play. So S tier, I think, very deserving for the Devil Dinosaur. Okay, next we have Domino. This is an interesting one. It is drawn into your hand every time on turn 2, so it gives you a bit of consistency. I don't hate it. It's okay having a 2-drop to play every time. I'll probably put it in B tier. Not a lot of decks necessarily will want to run it, but it's an okay value card. I think it's better than the C tier cards. Okay, next we have Mr. Sinister. This card's a bit of a weird one. It's got some synergy with things like Forge, perhaps. And you can get 4 for 2, which is not terrible. Mr. Sinister at this pool level is pretty okay, I would say, honestly. Maybe even a B tier. But the only issue is it does clog your board up a bit. That can be a problem. Obviously, later on when you unlock Patriot, and Cerebro as cards, it becomes a powerhouse of a card. So I'll probably put it in B tier. I think that's fair. Okay, next we have Electra. This one can be quite good before you've unlocked Killmonger. If you want to deal with those 1-drops, if the opponent's playing a lot of Zoo, then Electra can be okay value. I don't hate it as a card. I'd probably put it in C or B. I think B is probably fair. It's an okay play. Not too amazing, not too terrible. Okay, next we have Iron Fist. Iron Fist is an alright card. It's got some movement synergy. It's pretty great in movement decks, of course, being able to move Multiple Man or Vulture or whatever it might be. But at this stage of the collections, I would say it's probably a C tier card. There's not a lot of decks you run it in. It's not really as important as a Multiple Man in a movement deck, so let's put it in C tier, I think. Hulkbuster, next one. This card's quite interesting. Sort of a movement synergy card again. I'll probably put this in C tier as well. You don't really generally want to play this. It's only 4 stats. It can sometimes be good with things like Namor or, there's a lot of wacky combos you can pull off with Hulkbuster since it doesn't fill up your row and whatnot. You can play it on Nightcrawler, for example, and move your strength around. But yeah, I don't think Hulkbuster is particularly good. It's sort of a gimmicky one. So I'll put it in C tier, shall I? Okay, next, American Chavez. Quite good at this pool level because it gives you consistency. You never draw it before turn 6. You always draw it on turn 6. That's pretty good for a 6-drop at this level. And the 9 stats, not a lot of cards get that much that aren't 6-cost cards. So I think Chavez goes in A tier, maybe even an S tier, honestly, at this pool level. It just gives you consistency, helps you draw your good cards, means you don't have to play bad ones. Yeah, maybe even Chavez in S tier. It's really good at this pool level, to be honest. I think a lot of decks run it. And yeah, gives you some nice consistency and just a good 6-drop. Yeah, let's put it in S tier. Okay, next, Deathlock. Deathlock's pretty good later on when you have Death as a card, which gains a reduction in mana every time you destroy units. But at this stage, at this collection level, it's a 3 for 5. It's not great. You can maybe get some destroy synergy with Nova, but other than that, it's pretty bad, to be honest. So I'll put it in C. Yeah, not a great card. It's kind of okay-ish, but yeah, not really good enough. Yeah, probably deserves C. Okay, Nova. Nova's a pretty good card. It works better when you have Killmonger and you can do stuff. You can, of course, do Carnage. I think Carnage is here somewhere, but I can't find him. He's all the way at the bottom. Carnage on Nova's an okay sort of 2-card play. It's nothing super amazing, to write home about. So I probably put Nova in maybe B tier. It's like an alright card. It has some, there's some synergies with certain locations, like Vormir, is that the name of it? The one where you destroy the first unit you play there, things like that. I don't know, Nova could be a C tier card, honestly, at this pool level. It used to be really, really OP when it boosted everything by 2 strength, but boosting by 1, not so strong, but you can still play it with Carnage, theoretically, and have it be not too weak. So that is the next one, Carnage. Carnage maybe is a B tier card. I'll probably just put it in C at this point. Definitely better when you unlock more cards later on, but this destroy package isn't particularly strong at this stage of things. Nova, though, has a bit more stuff that it can do. Okay, next up we've got Blade. Blade, 3 stats for 1 is pretty great, can work quite well in a Zoo deck if you play all of your 1-drops at the end of the game. Also works quite well in the discard package, so I'll probably put it, it's a little tricky, maybe B, maybe A. I quite like the fact that you can just play Zoo and play it at the end of the game. So this is maybe an A tier card. I'm not sure it's quite as good as these other A tiers, though. You know what, I'm going to put Nova down here with the other Destroy cards. I think the Destroy package is C for this pool. Blade deserves to be here. Yeah, that looks good to me. You maybe can't exactly see. There's not enough space for all these cards. I'm going to shrink myself. Ah! Okay, there we go. Next up we have Onslaught. Onslaught is doubling the effects of all your ongoing cards. Quite a powerful card. You can synergize it with Claw, for example, which we also have in this pool, for a pretty powerful play. I think I'll put it in A tier. Can work in certain decks, and when it does, it's very, very good. Okay, next we have Groot. This card's not so great. It boosts by 3 if your opponent's played a card there, one of the Guardians of the Galaxy, if they play in the same row in the location as you. Could be a D tier card, to be honest. I wouldn't really play this in most decks, especially at this level. Not super good. Okay, Captain America. Getting boosts for every other unit you have in a location. Often going to be 6 strength if you're playing in the right deck. At this stage, I think Captain America is a pretty solid card. It might be A tier, it might be more deserving of B tier. I'll throw it in B tier. It's certainly an okay card that you can run in some decks. Okay, Lizard. Lizard, also a great card here. I think it's got to be S tier. A lot of decks run Lizard. It's just a great 5 stats for 2. You're getting so much value there. And you can combo it with a 4-drop in the late game, potentially. You can play it on turn 2. You can. The only downside is, of course, if your opponent plays into the same row, he's going to end up being a bit weaker. But I think he's deserving of that S tier slot, to be honest. Really strong card. Doctor Strange, move your highest unit to this row. Kind of okay, but yeah, movement card, and honestly, movement's not super good, as we've talked about, so I'll probably put it in C, or maybe even D, I don't know, man. It's not a great card, I think. It's got some bamboozle value, but I would never really play 3 value for 3 mana. It's just so bad. Let's put Doctor Strange all the way at the bottom in D here. I think that's fair for him. Rocket Raccoon. This is a great 1-drop. I'll probably put it in A tier. I'm tempted to put it in S tier even, because I played it a lot with Gamora, but I think you need Storm for it to get good value there. I think Rocket Raccoon, though, in general, is a pretty good 1-drop for Zoo decks and the like. Yeah, just a good 4 for 1 in a lot of situations. Very nice. Cable. Cable's quite good in Dino decks, probably an A tier card. Again, another one you can run. I'm not sure if it deserves A or B. Could be B. It's quite nice for seeing what your opponent's up to, checking out their game plan, and getting some Dino value. But yeah, it's kind of not the greatest in the early pools, because you want that sort of raw strength rather than the information a lot of times. So I'll probably put him in B tier, I think. Okay, Lady Sif. This card's unfortunately not too great. I mean, with Apocalypse, you get value, right? But I wouldn't generally want to run these cards, and I feel like Lady Sif at 3 mana is not so good. Used to be 2 mana in the beta a long time ago. It was very strong there. Let's put it in D tier, I think. Not a great card. Obviously, you probably want to run it if you're playing Apocalypse. Maybe Apocalypse should come down here to D. I don't know. Maybe he should be joined. Maybe I'll put him in D tier. Apocalypse D tier, mate, with Lady Sif. There you go. We're not going to worry too much about that. It's not great cards. Too predictable. Easy to play around. Lots of points, but easy to play around. Okay, next we have Bishop. Bishop's quite a powerful play, particularly in zoo decks where you play your 1-drops later in the game. And just in general, quite a good value card. If you're able to play about 5 or 6 cards after playing him, then he's pretty damn good. He doesn't fit in every deck. I'll probably put him in B tier here. You can build around him and make your deck very, very strong with the Bishop. But yeah, B tier seems fair. Next we have Cosmo. Now Cosmo might just be deserving of S tier, to be honest. It's just a tech card that you can play really in a lot of decks that are not doing on reveals. It might be more like an A, but it is very good even in later pools, so I'm tempted to S tier it up. I don't know, tricky one. S tier? What do you think, guys? S tier or A tier? Kind of depends on your deck a bit, but I think Cosmo is just a really nice controlling play, shutting down the on reveals of your opponent. Then we've got Armor. This is an ongoing card. It protects you from being destroyed against the Shang-Chis of the world and the Electras and the Killmongers. I don't know. Armor might also be an S tier tech card, especially later on in the pools. I'm not sure you want to run it in every deck. Maybe these tech cards should be A tier. I don't know. I think that's fair because they don't really necessarily fit in every single deck, but they can certainly be very strong in some kinds of decks. All right, next we have Wolverine. Crap card, mate. Pretty terrible. Let's put him in D tier. Absolute rubbish. Might even be E, honestly. I would never run this card, even if you're running Carnage. I mean, it's just such a clunky combo and you don't even get a huge amount of value from it. So I'll probably put Wolverine in E. Next we've got Heimdall. This is a nice card for movement. Of course, you move all the units to the left and you can bamboozle your opponent with it. Pretty good. Maybe a B tier card, I think. You can run it in some decks, even without movement. Very nice finisher and confuse your opponent sometimes. Craven. Okay, at this pool level, Craven is pretty awful. Very hard to get the value from it. Maybe it's deserving of C. It's probably a bit better than some of the other options. But yeah, without cards like Cloak, Craven is not very great. Might just be a D tier card, honestly, guys. I don't know. Maybe a D tier card. Yeah, I'll put him in D tier. I think this movement stuff doesn't work too well at this pool level. Now that I think about it, Multiple Man should really be in C. Yeah, I'm going to change my rankings a little bit here, guys. Don't sue me. Domino should probably also be in C. I'm now comparing cards, and Domino's probably not that good. Mr. Sinister could also be C. But now we have Claw. Claw, I think, is an S tier card, guys. You get that +5 ongoing strength in the right row, and it just gives you what you need to overcome the points of the opponent, split your strength nicely, or perhaps there's a row that is locked down you can't access, but now Claw lets you. Great card, really, really strong, versatile, can be played in lots of archetypes. And yeah, I love Claw. Good card. So, guys, that's my tier list. What do you think of it? I think that's pretty fair. I think I've given pretty fair shake for a lot of these cards. Honestly, maybe Domino's B. I don't know. I wouldn't run it in a lot of decks necessarily. But yeah, I think it's a pretty fair tier list. Let me know what you think of my ratings. Hopefully it helps if you're new to the game, can avoid some of these terrible D cards and E cards. Don't run these cards, guys, if you value gaining cubes and climbing ranks. With that being said, guys, watch my other tier lists if you haven't already. Subscribe as always for more juicy Snap and other card gaming content, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.